Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Arsenal Fan TV podcast. Joining myself and regular Akil today is a very special guest. He works for Le Parisien. You can find him on BT Sports European Football Show. We have Julien Lorenz. Good afternoon, Julien. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, boys. My pleasure.
Good stuff. I want to crack on, really. We've just come off the 2-1 away victory to Crystal Palace. Everyone's thoughts are now, I suppose, turning to the game at home against Monaco. Can you tell us what's the French perception of Arsenal now and Wenger now?
Well, in my opinion, it's probably still the same than 15 years ago or even 10 years ago. You know, despite the club being a bit less successful in terms of trophies than it was at that time, there's still a lot of admiration, I think, for what Wenger has done in France and for Arsenal. For stuff, you know, we always say in France that Arsenal are the 21st Ligue 1 club because there's so much French people supporting Arsenal and there's so many French players involved at the club or who have been involved through the years. The manager is French, so he feels almost like it was a French club anyway. And I think a lot of people in France still relate a lot to Arsenal. You know, when you hear like Olivier Giroud, for example, talking that when he was growing up, there was just one club for him in England, it was Arsenal. Because everybody in France at the time already was talking about Arsenal because of Wenger, because of all the great French players they had through the years, and I think it's still there. You know, I can see with my cousins, for example, my little cousins, or you know, my friends who have kids, for example, who are around 10 and start really getting into football. For them, it's a lot of them are big Arsenal fans because of what Arsenal means in France, and I think that's very important. And it's obviously a big irony that Arsenal will play Monaco for Wenger as well, but also for the fact that, like I said, Arsenal often feels like another French club in France.
Cool. Akil?
Yeah, I mean, well, how do you think the view has changed, or has it changed? I know you said sort of the view on Arsene Wenger is probably the same as it was 15 years ago, but obviously in England, you know, you sort of work for the media. We sort of see, you know, how the pressure's increased, fans' expectations. In France, has the view changed on Arsene Wenger and regarding what he's won, or is he still just as respected as he was 20 years ago? And do you think if he ever left Arsenal, would there be a job for him in France, whether it will be at PSG or even the French national team?
Yeah, there's a few. I think the respect for him is the same. I think the admiration again for him is the same. Yes, you know, in the last 10 years, well, let's say the first 10 years of his time at Arsenal, or the first 9 years, have been more successful than the last 9 years. But it's still incredible what he's achieved in terms of longevity, in terms of success overall, in terms of players that he's brought through. You know, the youth ranks to the top club. You know, those players who were nothing before he signed them and who became, you know, top players, or were not top players when he signed them and became top players and, you know, under him. So I think, and I think that will always be there. You know, in France, we may see him a bit differently than you do in England because we will be further apart, because maybe we'll be biased because he's French, obviously. So we maybe not as tough with him that we would be maybe with another manager. But the fact is, we still feel that he's doing an incredible job at the club. He's done fantastically well, considering the financial situation when the stadium was built, for example, which I really felt that even Arsenal fans and people in England overall didn't really get it. You know, at the time, considering the money he had available, it was still quite special to finish in the top 4 every single year, to qualify to the last 16 of the Champions League every single year. And I always thought that French people are a bit more, how can I put it, that English people are, the expectations of Arsenal fans and English fans are always bigger than in France. In France, we'll be more measured. You know, we think like, hang on, you know, that's a bit harsh. The criticism is a bit harsh because what he's done is still incredible, and I'm not sure many managers or even any would have done the same in those circumstances. So, but like I said, maybe we're a bit biased and not really objective. However, he's been a bit criticized in France, in the L'Équipe newspaper, for example, in Le Parisien newspaper as well. I've written sometimes articles, especially that season where of the Eduardo injury when Arsenal were, top of the league in March and all crumbled a little bit. And I felt at the time, he should have guided the team a bit more. It was a very young team at the time, despite William Gallas being there. But I felt maybe that year he should have done a bit better. For the rest, I think he's done a great job. And I think that the fact also that shows you that he's done a great job is that if PSG and their Qatari owners really were desperate to get him, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and even last summer as well, it's because he must do something right. If the French Federation wanted him as a national team manager, it's because he must do some things right as well. If Real Madrid wanted him all the years back and Bayern Munich as well, it must be because he's doing something right as well at Arsenal. So I think all that shows you that if no one cared about him anymore, then maybe, we could all say, well, he's past his best. Look at him. No one even care about him anymore. But the fact that still big clubs around Europe would like him as a manager, I think shows you that he's still right up there amongst the best, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've wrote a few pieces as well, and I think sort of one of his biggest achievements. I mean, everyone would always think his best achievement was obviously going 49 games unbeaten, and of course, in terms of success, it was. But I think, getting through the Emirates Stadium move, I thought that was absolutely tremendous, and I still do. I think that is one of the biggest achievements, we'll ever see in football. I really think it's a football masterclass to keep us in the top four, and sort of get through that move, because that sets the club up for life, the next 100, 200 years.
Yeah.
That those 5, 6 years were absolutely key. But then at the same time, I think in the last maybe 2 to 3 years, I can see why the criticism has come a little bit, because I think he was given time over that period. I think more recently, I think people expect a bit more, because, they look at it as, okay, you're over the sort of stadium move, financial restraints aren't there as much, with the signing of Ozil and Sanchez and co. So I think people now expect the team to sort of develop and go on and win things. And I mean, that's probably the next question. I mean, we won the FA Cup last year. I mean, what a great weekend that was. But where do you think, or what do you think Arsenal can do this season? And I personally feel if Arsene Wenger's ever to win a league title, next year is the year to win it. And I think, Jose Mourinho was on Goals on Sunday today, and he was saying that, with sort of the squad they have available, the attacking options, he doesn't understand why Arsenal aren't with Chelsea and Man City. And I think, do you think next year, I mean, this season, obviously, the league title is probably beyond us. We're still in the cup, so there's an opportunity there. But in the league next year, do you think Arsenal can realistically win the league? And if not, do you think maybe there's a position or two that they just need to improve on to take that step?
Yeah, I think next season they'll be contenders more than this year. I think they're not too far this year at all. I think, again, people are a bit harsh. I think they've been very unlucky at times. I mean, the game against United at the Emirates, for example, who they have one shot on target and scored 2 goals. It's a game that Arsenal would win 99 times out of 100 if they're playing again 99 times. Unfortunately, they lost that one. But if you think of those times where, I think things haven't gone their way, where things have got a lot of Chelsea's way this season, and even City, felt that maybe at times things didn't really go their way. It was for Chelsea, everything went their way, although, maybe a bit less this weekend, for example, and the last few weeks. But I don't think they're too far. I think, as much as I love Francis Coquelin, and I've got a big man crush on him, and on a few other players, but on him as well.
So have we all.
Yeah, I still think he needs a bit more experience in that very key holding midfield role. I think Coquelin can develop as a very good player, as a very, very good player even, because I think he's got everything to be great in that position. But maybe a bit more experience is really what he's lacking right now. And I'm really hoping, I did hope that Wenger would buy a holding player last summer or even in January. He went for other options. I think Gabriel is a very good signing, and he's just getting him used to English football through the cup games, through training with the team and everything. But then I think when Gabriel will be used to English football, I think it'll be a very good signing. And I think if you add another strong defensive midfielder in there, I think Arsenal will be able to compete with Chelsea and City and probably United next season for the title. I think there's just one thing before we maybe speak to something else about Wenger that's very interesting, and I think that is not highlighting enough in this country, is that Wenger won't change now. He won't change. He has been the same for the last 20 years. He was the same at Monaco. Some people may think that he doesn't renew himself enough. Fair enough. I understand that. I think in myself now and again, someone like Sir Alex Ferguson was very good at renewing himself with, for example, the new players he had through his squads.
Well. Yeah.
And maybe Wenger and Mourinho as well, for example. Yeah. But maybe Wenger is a bit more even old school. As in, for him, he's got a method, and he thinks that method, and we've seen it, has brought him success, so he will stick to it. You might think that it's a bit dated somehow, and I think it is. I think sometimes maybe he could shout a bit more to the players, although it seems that he's done it a bit more this season. Sometimes he could delegate a little bit more to Steve Ball, for example, or even Boro Primorac, and sometimes he doesn't do it enough. I think there's a bit of that, but it won't change now. So we may as well all take him the way he is now and see the positives in that way of coaching, instead of comparing with Mourinho and what would have Mourinho done then, what would have Ferguson done then, what would have Van Gaal done then. I think we should leave him. I know some Arsenal fans are frustrated when he doesn't bring anyone on before the 70th minute, because that's his thing, his thing. But old school managers are a bit like that, they thought, well, if I bring someone here, if it's too early in the game, by the time he get used to it, he could make a mistake, we could consider goal. I know that's his stuff. Sometimes it frustrates me as well, as a journalist when I'm covering him. I say, why on earth is he not bringing someone after the hour mark, for example, or 55th minute? But that's his stuff, and he has worked in the past, and people tend to forget when he works. Sometimes he didn't work, and you wonder why he only brought another striker in the 88th minute. But that's his stuff, and I think we should take him with the positive and with the negatives as well.
Julien, can I ask, where do you see this team in terms of this development? I mean, some people, when we beat Man City away, it was like a watermark moment in the eyes of a lots of Gooners, and then a few weeks later we go to Tottenham Hotspur and we put in quite an abject performance. Where do you see the team? Are we somewhere nearer the team that can consistently beat, or on the cusp of consistently competing and beating our rivals, or do you think we're still a little way short of that and we'll struggle to live with them in the long run?
No, I think Arsenal are not too far, and it's interesting you asked me that, because the other day I was on the Time podcast and I said something that I think maybe some Arsenal fans have misunderstood. I said that after the Tottenham defeat, the game I was covering for my newspaper, I said that maybe the wrong thing that happened for Arsenal was the win at City. It was such an easy win in a way that I think a lot of players and a lot of fans and a lot of people who follow football in general thought, well, they did that at City, so they can go to Spurs and do exactly the same 2 weeks later. And I even think that maybe the players were a little bit complacent because of the win at City, in just thinking, we're going to sit deep, we're going to do the same, and we're going to play the counter-attack, we're going to pick up passes, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and hopefully we're going to win as well. I think they forgot that the intensity, because it was a North London derby, wouldn't be the same at all. Maybe they forgot that Alexis Sanchez was not there, which
affected it,
made a massive difference.
Yeah.
And maybe they thought as well that, maybe they just thought, well, let's approach the game the same way as City, because he worked at City and he will work for us at Spurs. And he didn't. And I really think that, let's say they lost at City or they drew at City, but really, in a tough game where they had to fought hard, where the intensity was much higher than it was actually at the Etihad, I think that would have served them for the Spurs game. And I think maybe winning the way they did at City, because it was an easy win, let's be honest. City were not great because Arsenal was so good, that it was an easy win at the end. And I think maybe that didn't serve them in the way that they approached and they prepared the Spurs game. And I think that was a shame, because like you said, I think they should have kicked on from the City game. And I was really disappointed by the way they approached the game, by the lack of aggression they put in the game, all those challenges they lost, all the second balls they lost as well. And I think just Spurs wanted it more than Arsenal did on that game. But I think hopefully that was just an accident, and I really believe that the gap is not too far between Chelsea and City and Arsenal.
It wasn't just the second balls we lost. We lost the fourth and the fifth balls often. It was that's how bad it was.
But do you see what I mean? Do you agree with me in a way, or share the fact that maybe that win at City just didn't serve the players because they thought that going to Spurs would be kind of similar, and I think they lost that term in intensity because of that win at City.
Indeed. It then comes down to the manager and the coaching staff to just focus the players a bit, because obviously you use the City win in a positive. It's something where the players know, okay, we are a good football team. We can go and beat the best. But at the same time, maybe the focus has to be, City weren't great that day. We will face harder tests, so we still need to be focused. We can play similar. I think at Spurs we just dropped too deep, and we were just. So when we went 1 up, I think last year was in the mind as well. It's not just the City game, but last year, if you remember, Thomas Rosicky scored within 70 seconds, and then we kind of, we just defended. And I think we thought we could do it again, perhaps, and I think we had sort of, that was too much in our mind.
I think for Arsenal fans, it's a matter of, can we get that consistency? Beating the highs of beating Man City 1 week, the lows of losing to Tottenham another week, outplaying Man United, at home so convincingly, nearly beating City, losing the odd goal to Liverpool away. It's that kind of, can we get that consistency right? I think once we can, then we probably would be able to kick on and really put in a title challenge.
It's going to be interesting to see what sort of Arsenal turn up at Old Trafford in the FA Cup. The FA Cup's obviously is important because we're holders, but I think the game in particular is very important, because I think the whole sort of world wants to see that. Okay, Arsenal beat City, can they go and do it again? Because that's the question. We'll write off Spurs for now, but if we can do it again at Old Trafford, then suddenly you think, actually, I know Man United aren't playing the best they've ever played, but on the day, Di Maria, Rooney, Van Persie, and co, they're all very, very good footballers. So.
And they'll step up for this game as well. They'll, it's always been a big game, Man United, Arsenal games, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Just going back to yesterday's game, judging by a lot of the stats that I saw, I think we made 80 or between 77 and 80 odd clearances yesterday. So it was pretty much another backs to the wall performance. Do you think this is? Akil, you were there. Do you think it was a case of this is how we're going to play in most games away, or was it just a matter of Palace really put us under the cosh, and that's all we could do was just to sort of withstand the pressure?
I think when we sort of went 2 up, we did drop deep a little bit, but I think the sort of the and I know Julien sort of says, Wenger's been the same and he'll never change, and I know exactly what he means. But certain aspects, where we used to dominate games, keep the ball the whole game, we've sort of changed that a little bit recently. We were happy to let Palace have the ball in their own half because we know they can't hurt us. But once we went 2 up, we didn't really create much after that. We had one chance with Sanchez hit wide. Apart from that, I can't remember many chances. So I think it is a different approach, but I think we're just, I think what we've scored in the first 30 minutes, we've scored a lot of goals in the first 30 minutes of games. I can't remember the actual stat I saw yesterday, but it is a slightly different approach, but I think if it's working, there's sort of no reason to change it. I think where it will be interesting is if we don't get an early goal, then what does the Arsenal team do? Because I think then they'll have to force it more, and then you could see a bit of a change. But I just think every game is sort of different. At the moment, we are getting early goals, so it's helping. But I don't, think it's always going to be like that. I think it just depends on the game.
Interesting. Okay, let's move on to the Monaco game. Julien, can you tell us a little bit about this Monaco team, where they are? Last season, they for many parts of the season, they really gave PSG quite a run for their money. This season, they've loaned out their star striker for an exorbitant amount of money. They've let go of Campos to their rivals, Marseille. They seem to be a lot more belligerent in terms of they don't score many, but they don't concede. Last Friday they won the Courtazor derby down to 10 men with another 1-0 win. What kind of team are we seeing now in Monaco this season?
Yeah, not because I'm French, but I think it's a fascinating story. The story of a Russian billionaire who arrives to a club like Monaco, who starts spending all his cash in buying James Rodriguez and Moutinho and Falcao and Toulalan and Kondogbia for a amount of money that were far bigger than the value of the players at the time. And then the guy realized that, hang on a minute, what's financial fair play? FFP? What's that FFP? No one told me of FFP when I bought the club. No one told me like all that cash I spent. If I don't balance the book, then I will have to pay fines and fines and fines after fines after fines. And the guy realized we can't go on like this. Let's get rid of all those big players, the big salaries. Let's invest in younger players who we might buy 10 million or 12 million, but then we can sell for 30 million in 2 or 3 years time after they brought us, maybe a cup or some Champions League football regularly. And I think it's really interesting because that's what financial fair play was installed for, to avoid a repeat of the Abramovich and Chelsea story, basically, or even the PSG and the Qatar owner story. And I think that's working well for football. However, if I was a Monaco fan, I'd be gutted, because I thought at some point that I would get to see a lot of big players in my, at my club, in my stadium. And now I end up with all those players, being sold and younger players arriving. But now it's a completely different Monaco. Forget last season, forget Claudio Ranieri, forget Falcao, forget James and all of that. Now it's a much more resilient team. Leonardo Jardim, the Portuguese manager, in his first season, is doing a very good job defensively. They're fourth in the table with a game in hand. So depending of the Marseille-Saint-Etienne game tonight, they can even probably challenge for third place before the end of the season with Monaco. And it's a very solid team. Like you said, they don't concede many goals at all. They play 4-3-3 with the three midfielders working really hard. Whether it's Toulalan, Moutinho and the young Bernardo Silva, or if it's Kondogbia, or if it's Bakayoko, depending. They've got big players there as well who will think more about defending than attacking. And then offensively, that's why they struggle a bit more to score. Berbatov is obviously still there, but he's 33, and runs like my dad. So you're thinking he still has it. Obviously, he still has the touch. The touch, you never lose it. But he's no, that was. But he's sorry. But the touch is always there. Will always be there. But he's not. Obviously, he was not the quickest before, so he's even less quick now. And I think they struggle a bit with a presence up front, to hold the ball up and things like that. But they've got quick wingers, especially Ferran Carrasco, who usually plays on the left-hand side, who is a very, very, very talented kid. I really like him, very skillful, a lot of pace. And they've got a few youngsters like that, like I said before, like Bernardo Silva, like Martial, like Ocampos that they loaned, like you said, to Marseille. But don't expect free-flowing attacking football when they come to the Emirates on Wednesday. Don't forget the same at home in 3 weeks' time, because they will defend more than attack there, whatever happened in the first leg anyway. But it's a solid team, and they will make life difficult for Arsenal. Arsenal will have to break them down. But I think if, an Arsenal team focused, committed, and really motivated, especially in terms of the intensity to put in the game, because I think for me that would be the key, they will go through without too much problems. However, if they start to be a bit complacent, if they start to, miss a few chances, then Monaco will get a bit more comfortable. And if they can get home with, a 0-0 draw, a 1-0 draw, even a 1-0 defeat, they might fancy their chance for the second leg and make life even more difficult, I think, for Arsenal.
Do you think, is there a danger that we're a bit too confident about getting a team like Monaco? I mean, when the draw was made, everyone said, thank goodness we got the easiest draw team in the draw for once. Is there a danger that we could be underestimating Monaco? Do the French think that we're underestimating Monaco?
The French don't think so, no, because we've seen how solid they are, and they're just a pain to play against. Let's be clear. It's a pain to play against that Monaco team, because they're going to be really strong in the challenges, in the duels. They're going to jump high for the headers. They're going to tackle hard on the floor. They're going to follow you everywhere. They work hard. They're really hard-working team, working for each other, great team spirit. And yes, they're not the most talented in terms of skills, or apart from, like we said, Berbatov or Ferran Carrasco, or even Moutinho. Bernardo Silva has a good left foot, but he's not Messi either. But they work really hard, and it's always a pain to play against those kind of teams. The thing is really interesting is when the draw was made, they were doing sort of okay in France, and people said to me, especially on Twitter, like, that's an amazing draw. And I said, yeah, it's a good draw for Arsenal. Then Monaco put on a very good run of results. I think they won 12 of 13 at some point with 11 clean sheets or something. And then some Arsenal fans got a bit worried and were tweeting me saying like, gosh, that's going to be a tough game, isn't it? And I said, yeah, it's going to be 2 tough games because they defend so well. And then recently, it's been a bit more difficult for Monaco. They've drawn a few games. They've lost as well. They haven't been as efficient and solid defensive that they've been before, apart from Friday night. But before that, it was a bit more so-so, not as good as before. So some Arsenal fans had their hopes a bit higher up and saying, oh, maybe we'll be fine. And I think Arsenal will be fine. But just don't misjudge this Monaco team. They're a really hard-working team that's a pain to play against. However, Arsenal are still favourite by far, I think.
Yeah. I think it's just, Arsenal haven't they've gone out at the first knockout stage for the last several years, it feels like forever. But I think the Arsenal fans certainly were just so pleased that we didn't get Bayern Munich or Real Madrid or Barcelona. That there's actually a chance to go far in this competition. It's obviously a competition Arsene Wenger's never won, and I think we see how desperate he is to do well in the competition. So I just think it's a great opportunity, and I think there's obviously the specialness with him going back and to Monaco and sort of like our French players. I think it's going to be a good tie, and hopefully it will start a good run in the Champions League. But I just want to ask you before we let you go, Julien, about sort of 2 players and two French players. And you mentioned him briefly, Francis Coquelin. What's the sort of what do France think of Francis Coquelin? Because he's obviously been, he's been on loan a lot. He's sort of in and out the team, but since he's come back from Charlton, he's kind of got in the team. And even yesterday, he didn't have his best game ever, but he was still effective. What do France think of him? And also Olivier Giroud. That's, I go to sort of nearly every Arsenal game, and the debate, about any player isn't as big as it is Giroud. There's so many opinions, and some people think he's rubbish. Some people think he's very good. Some people think he's been doing really well now. Some people think he works hard. Some people think he doesn't work hard.
Some people think he's world class.
It's amazing. There's the sort of, something people used to throw at Giroud was he disappears in big games, doesn't score in big games. But obviously this year he's scored against Man United, he scored against City at City, he scored against Liverpool at Liverpool. So what do you think of those 2 players? What do you personally think, and what do France think?
So, okay, let's start with Coquelin, because I've always been a fan. I've always been a fan. I was obviously already in London when he arrived. He had a big reputation in France when he was a 15-year-old kid, a 16-year-old kid. A lot of clubs wanted him. And that's what Arsene does as well. He obviously gets them when they hang on a minute, sorry. No, it's definitely, I'm straight away. Sorry, let's start again. Let's start with Francis Coquelin, because I'm a big fan of his. I've always been a big fan. I was already in London when he signed for Arsenal. He was a very promising kid when he was 15 in France, 16. Everybody had heard of him, at least if we hadn't seen him play. But and Arsene did what he does best, which is signing the promising young players. Then I think I don't think he struggled, but it just took him time to adapt. I think he arrived at a time where it was difficult for young players, unless you were Cesc Fabregas, to break into this Arsenal team, especially, as a position where there was a lot of competition. And I think maybe he lost a bit of patience. When you're a kid and you were very young in your native country, it's not the same thing than to arrive to a club like Arsenal, for example, and think, oh, I'm going to get there and just, play straight away in the first team. So I think maybe he lost not a bit of interest, but I think he was a bit impatient at some points, and but Wenger never lost faith in him. It's not because he was out of contract in June that Wenger lost faith in him. Otherwise, he would have sold him a long time ago. He always kept faith in him. And just thought, well, give him a bit of time. Remember Flamini, for example? He had 3 very average years, and the 4th one was good. Then he decided to go away, but that's another issue. And I think with Coquelin it was the same. Wenger always kept in mind the kid has qualities. He can be really good in that holding midfielder role. And And I think that's credit to Wenger as well, and to Coquelin for never giving up. Coquelin never said, I want to go and play somewhere else. Sell me. I don't want to be here anymore. Coquelin, at some point, just decided to think, well, I'm going to work even harder. I'm going to go on loan and do even better. Last season at Freiburg was not great, but it was, in a very, very, very average team, to say the least. And then he went to Charlton, and a friend of mine who's a big Charlton fan saw him earlier this year and said, that Coquelin, he's a great player. He's far too good for the Championship. And that's why I thought, well, maybe something will happen to him later in the season. And then Arteta got injured again. He got called back from his loan, and then he has never left the team anymore. And I think he still lacks a bit of experience, like I said before, but potentially he can be a very good player in that position for Arsenal. And for Giroud, again, I've been a big fan, but trying to be objective, the goal he scored at Palace on Saturday, Giroud would have never scored it last year or the year before. Yeah, that's how much he's improved. He would have been on the edge of the box, or it would have been a little bit too short, or the ball would have gone over the bar, but he would have never scored the way he did yesterday. He's so much sharper now than he was, ever since he arrived at the club. He's much more clever in his movement, on the ball and off the ball as well. And I really think he gets on very well with Alexis and Welbeck as well. And the other thing, like you said, Akhil, in the build-up of the question, now he's scoring in big games as well, away from home, at home, which is something that he didn't do before. And for me, that's where you see that he's going to step higher. He's got an extra gear in his improvement and him as a player. And Wenger says he's much better now than when he arrived at the club. And I think it's obvious for every Arsenal fan to see that. And I think it's credit to him for, to have worked so hard to get where he is now. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. And he said that as well. And by the way, I've interviewed him for the Arsenal magazine, the one coming out this month. And it's a fascinating interview where he tells, where he's improved, how he's improved, even when he was injured earlier in the season. And I think he deserves credit for that. And I think Wenger and all the staff deserve credit for make him work. Especially, he said in an interview, he's worked on his tippy toes, if you want. He says, on those little steps that he has to do when he's on the ball, for example, to be a bit more agile even on the ball, because he's such a big lad and, such a heavy lad as well. And you can see his touch has improved, which is something, like we said, Berbatov would never lose his touch. When the guy will be 70, he will be still classy when he plays football. But Giroud never had the touch of Berbatov, for example, or skillful players. He was always much better in the air or more efficient in front of goal. But you can't say that Giroud always had a fantastic touch. But he's starting to develop that touch in his first touch, in his second touch as well, the way he turns when he controls the ball. And I think he deserves credit for the work he's done and to get the kind of player he is now. And we saw at Palace, for example, with that goal that I really believe he wouldn't have scored or last season or 2 years ago.
Okay. Finally, Julien, it's been really quite comprehensive. Finally, I would like to just ask you one more question that we've had from one of our guys. And
no problem.
It's really more of a sort of possible transfer issues. In France, we've heard a lot about this kid Fekir at Olympique Lyonnais, that he might be moving to Arsenal. What do you think in terms of that sort of transfer rumour, or even someone like Alexander Lacazette, who's really been setting the League One on fire for the last couple of years? Is there any sort of, do you think there'd be any movement in that direction to Arsenal?
It's interesting. I mean, there's a few things. One, I think in terms of offensive options, especially in terms of striker, I think Arsenal and Arsene Wenger have enough now. I would like to see Chupa Akpom, for example, getting a few games and leaving him time to develop, because I think he's got something special. But if you buy a Lacazette, or if you buy, I don't know, another striker from another league, or even from England, then where's Akpom going to go? For example, I mean, Sanogo is on loan. He will come back. I think Sanogo has potential as well. But again, if you buy Lacazette, I don't think you need Lacazette. I don't think Arsenal needs Lacazette. Fekir is a bit different. Fekir has a creative touch that I've rarely seen in football. It's on his first big season, so maybe a move in the summer to a big club like Arsenal will be a bit too early. But he has something special. He's a small player. He's a bit of a he's different than Cazorla, but he's one of those kind of players where if he wants to, you can never get close to the ball. He's the kind of guy where you play with your mates that is so good with the ball that you can't touch it, and he really annoys you. I was going to say a stronger word, but and he's that kind of guy. When he gets on the ball.
Would you say he's more of a Cazorla type player, or is he more of a winger?
Yes, he's a bit. Although he only has a left foot, whereas Cazorla is incredible because he's got two-footed, and he's one of a very few to be like this in world football. But Fekir is only left foot, but why left foot, man? He's like a hand. He can do anything he wants. But it's a bit too early. Give him a bit more time. He's never been in Champions League, for example. You know what? He's very good now in Ligue 1 this season with Lyon, and Lyon are, walking on water. Like I said as well, for example. But, I want to see him in Champions League before to decide if he's good enough for a top club like Arsenal, because maybe the Champions League is too high for him. And if he's not good enough for the Champions League, he won't be good enough for the Premier League with Arsenal, for example. So I think we need to see him in tougher games than just some Ligue 1 games, for example, or even some games against PSG where he was good, but that was one game in the season, you see?
Yeah.
But the talent is there. Let's see him develop. Let's see what he can do. And I'm sure that, Arsene will do what he needs if he really wants to sign him. But, it's a great story to start with. I still think that it's a bit too early. Him, Lacazette is a bit different, but I don't think Arsenal needs Lacazette. But for Fekir, I think it would be a bit too early to buy him in the summer.
Okay. I'll let Akhil round it up with one question.
Yeah, so thanks, Julien, for your time. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. They're all one-word answers, so very quick.
Okay.
Sort of, Will Arsenal win the FA Cup this year?
Yes.
Will Arsenal win the Champions League this year?
I would love to say yes, but it's a no. Sorry. I mean, if you beat Monaco, you're in the quarterfinals. If you play, let's say, the winner of Basel against Porto, it's a big chance to go in the semi-final. Then in the semi-finals,
who knows?
You never know.
You can play second leg at home. You can, have 2 great performances, and then you're in the final. And in the final, anything can happen. So, I still think there's some tough clubs there. Probably better, especially in terms of experience, than Arsenal.
Yeah.
However, it's football, and you never know.
You're starting to make me
I would put more money on the FA Cup than the Champions League.
Yeah. Will Arsene Wenger win the league title at Arsenal? Like another one, obviously. He's already won 3. But will he win 6? It's a tough one.
Yes, because it would be a great story, and then he would retire as a legend for Arsenal Football Club, which is what he should be remembered as, and not remembered as someone who was great and then became rubbish, because that's not the truth either. And, capping the whole 18, 19, 20, 21 years with a league title would be incredible. And we say in French that the la boucle est bouclée, which is the cycle is finished basically. And then he could retire in peace with another league title, and deservedly so as well.
And live happily ever after. Last question, will Thierry Henry ever manage Arsenal?
Hello?
Yeah, last question. Will Thierry Henry ever manage Arsenal?
Sorry, can you start again? I lost you just there.
That's okay. Last question. Will Thierry Henry ever manage Arsenal?
Oh, that's a tough one as well.
Do you think, what, this is the last question, so do you think, what do you think Thierry Henry will do?
Love to. Yeah. I think he would love to. One, I'm not so sure he's going to be a good manager. I'm not sure he's going to be a good manager enough for Arsenal Football Club. 2, I'm not so sure that, those great love stories about probably your greatest player ever comes back to your club to manage you, and everything looks great, and then at the end it's not good, it's not great, and
Alan Shearer got Newcastle relegated, so that was Alan Shearer,
Yeah, exactly, those kind of things. I'm never quite keen on those kind of stories, and I just don't know. I would say yes, because again, I know how much Arsenal means to Thierry, how Thierry means to Arsenal and to the fans. And if he was to be successful at the club as a manager, it would be incredible. So I would say yes, but I would also say no, because I think there's plenty of very, very, very good and proven managers already out there in Europe, in the big leagues, in Germany, in France, in Italy, in Spain, everywhere, in England, obviously English, British managers, French managers, German, everywhere, that there's plenty of choice to succeed Wenger. more than Thierry, for example. Then in 10 years' time, maybe Thierry will be in 10 years' time a fantastic coach. Then fair enough. Then maybe at that time it would be great, or in 15 years' time, or 20 years' time, or whatever. Maybe then that would be the right moment for him to come back to the club. But I'm not so sure.
Great stuff. So Arsenal are going to win the FA Cup. Arsene Wenger's going to win the league next year and retire, and Thierry Henry's going to manage us in 15 years and win the Champions League. I'll take that.
Yeah, as confirmed by Julien Ruins.
Yeah. Julien, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, boys. With pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you, Julien. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so that was Julien Lorenz of Le Parisien, Guardian, Times, BT Sports, European Football Show. Akil, if we just want to conclude, I mean, you were there at the game yesterday, bit of a struggle, but at the end of the day, 3 points is 3 points, right?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't sort of matter sort of how you win. Certainly in a weekend where, Manchester United went to Swansea in their European game, shall we say, and lost. Tottenham, the result came in, looked 2-2, wasn't it?
So not a bad weekend, does it?
I don't know if Liverpool and Southampton.
I think they're playing today.
Yeah, playing soon, aren't they? So, it's certainly not a bad weekend. I think it's just, just got to keep winning, get some momentum. And then obviously, if we do sort of overcome, the Monaco test, I just think there'll be a bit of a buzz in the air. And I just think,
Everton at home next Sunday, isn't it?
At home and Old Trafford.
Yeah.
We can suddenly win that. I know it's easier said than done, all these games, but we could really have a good end to this season. I think it was vital to win yesterday. And we were lucky, at the end, Palace hit the post, it came out. It was all scary.
Ospina flapped a bit, didn't he? Again.
Yeah, it's an interesting one actually, because
did Cazorla get the man of the match? He did. Not Cazorla, Coquelin. Did he get man of the match?
I have
for us?
No idea at all. They didn't announce it, and I haven't really watched the highlights much.
There's a lot of speculation about. There's a lot of debate about whether it was actually a penny, whether it was occurred outside the area or inside the area.
Actually, sorry, I did see a bit of goals on Sunday. And it's the kick was probably just outside, but I mean, even Jose Mourinho said he wouldn't blame sort of a ref for getting that wrong because it was just so tight. I just think there was luck in both goals. Second goal, Welbeck was offside. It's you take that. I mean, we talked about the Man United game earlier with Julien and about sort of one shot, 2 goals, and one there was offside and there was a foul. I think Fellaini fouled Gibbs, and so luck sort of it goes around a little bit. It's
roundabouts.
Part of the game. It's part of the game. So
cool. All right then, just about wraps it up. I want to thank Akil for bringing on Julien, a special guest today, and I suppose we'll convene again I'll probably see you next Sunday, won't I, at the pub?
Yep.
For the Everton game. All right, pal. Okay, so that's been
Come on, you Gunners.
Come on, you Gunners. That's been an Arsenal Fan TV podcast. Thank you and goodbye.